Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today in the Rasmussen Theater as we celebrate our Living Earth Festival. We are back after 4 years. My name is Hayes Lavis, and I have the pleasure of working in the museum programs department here. And our next presentation is going to be on Chinampas. We have from Mexico City, we have Lucia Perez Volkow and Diego Astorga. So please welcome them, and they'll introduce themselves, tell you a bit about themselves, and tell you what a Chinampa is all about. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you'll find this interesting and educational. And if you have any questions, of course, don't hesitate to ask. So just before we start, we wanted to talk a little bit about our positionality. We are in the Museum of the American Indian. We are not indigenous people in Mexico. We are both from Mexico City. We grew up there. We are like, well, our families come from different parts. They immigrated to the city, and that's kind of where we hail from. But we're not from Xochimilco either. Xochimilco is the part of the city, the specific part of the city where we'll be speaking about. We're speaking about this because we work in Cocina Colaboratorio, which is a collective that works, among other places, in Xochimilco with different people from Xochimilco, different projects at Xochimilco, trying to weave together in a horizontal manner, both from academia, from design and arts, from producers and cooks, like trying to find ways to build more sustainable and more just food systems and more sustainable and more just ways of being. So with that being said, hopefully that didn't bore you. We're going to start. Lucia is going to tell you about the history of the Chinampas and of this region.
Hi. So what are we looking at? This is the first map ever done by a European of the city of Tenochtitlan. The city of Tenochtitlan was the capital city of the Mexicas, sometimes known as the Aztecs, is the way they founded in around 1519 when they arrived. And you can see it's a city in the middle of the lake, which is actually 5 lakes, but this was a depiction. It's in a valley surrounded by volcanoes. And the Mexicas had a really complex hydrological system and a cultivation system called the Chinampas that we will be explaining that was within the water. And ever since the Spaniards came, this is a drawing of Mexico City in the year 1628. The hydrology of the place was changed. The lakes have been slowly desiccated since 500 years ago. So we'll be telling you a little bit about this. For example, this is a map of Mexico City. You see the 5 different lakes. You see here a painting of the idea of how it was Tenochtitlan. Just to give you an idea of how complex the water management was by the Mexicas, together with the Chinampas, which is the agricultural system we'll be talking about, is there was a dam separating the lake of Texcoco, you see the big one, from the lake of Xochimilco, that was 16 kilometers long, that helped avoid flooding and helped separating the salty waters from Texcoco Lake from the more fresh waters from the Xochimilco. And as much as I can tell you how the city was built on a lake, on 5 lakes, this was a picture I took on my plane from Mexico City to DC two days ago. This is a part of the lake that is trying to be conserved. This weird structure, sort of like a chromosome, if you're familiar with chromosomes. The green one is an airport that was constructed, they started that construction in the lake and then it got canceled, but it sort of gives you the relationship that has been going on since the Spaniards arrived, and right now the government has with the lake.
So, as Lucia has told you, there's this long history of lakes and water in the city of Mexico. Out of all that area, the part that still survives as a lake of sorts is Xochimilco, which is that lake in the south. It survives partly because it wasn't part of Tenochtitlan, it was another settlement, and the city eventually grew and it became a part of the city. But it's a part of the city that still has this way of living in water, living with water. And you can see it in the streets. This is a mural, a picture taken in Xochimilco. You can see the many interpretations of water and like that connection with the history that people themselves recognize and see. So for instance, on the right-hand side, this figure like with the round eyes and the fangs and the water coming out of its mouth is a representation of the god of water, the Mexica god of water, Tlaloc, as it says there. Then you have on the other side Quetzalcoatl, which is another of the Aztec gods, well, Mexica gods, and Huitzilopochtli. These are some of like these deities. Huitzilopochtli is often represented like with a hummingbird. But you don't only have that, you don't only have like the Aztec glyph of water coming from the mouth of Tlaloc, you also have the different species that inhabit the lake. You have these herons, you have this landscape of water, and you have the frogs, the fish, which were part of the diet in Xochimilco, and you have the Chinampas, which still remain today. This is how Chinampas look now. Chinampas, as Lucia told you, are these patches of land built on the lake. In this case, you can't really see the water clearly from here, but you can see this line of trees of they're bumpland willows, and those kind of mark where the edge of the Chinampas are, because the way Chinampas were built and are still built is by layering organic matter with earth and then planting willows all around it. Well, first there's stakes that hold it together, then they plant willows, and the roots of the willows will kind of help the islands keep their shape. So these Chinampas are these like human-made islands, these artificial islands that were built to help the city grow and to help produce enough food for the city, and that in the case of Xochimilco still remain. So the main technique that is used to maintain the Chinampas and that is used to cultivate the Chinampas that still happens today is called chapin, which is basically this. When you do chapin, you take mud from the bottom of the lake. So that very long stick is actually an oar that's used to move in these canoes, or like they're more like ponds. The word is acali, which means like water structure or water house in Nahuatl. That's what people used to get around, and that's what people used to cultivate the land. So they use the oar tied to this net. If you come by the table that we have over at the lobby, or if you've come by, you maybe have seen that net. They use that to scrape silt, mud from the bottom of the lake. Then they usually put it in the canoe. Here we're using buckets because we didn't need as much. We were making like a little one, a little version of this technology or of this technique. And then what you do is you spread it. You spread it on the soil of the Chinampa. You lift a little edge, spread it while it's still kind of liquid. That's Gabi. She's the coordinator of the project. She has 2 Chinampas that she cultivates. So here we're helping her make chapin. After that, you kind of mark the mud. You kind of make little squares, and then you let it dry for a while, at which point you'll plant some seeds, each on a little square, and the humidity and the nutrients from the lake soil will help them grow. So eventually you cut them up, like imagine if you have a brownie, you cut up like little squares, and you end up with little squares of earth with little plants on them. So that's how Chinampas are maintained. This then in turn you sow in the Chinampa, and they grow and you produce different vegetables, different foods. And this is both a way to produce food and a way to keep the Chinampa alive, because what you're doing is you're adding more layers of earth on top of the Chinampa. If you stop doing that, the level slowly starts to go down until at some point the water kind of can take over. It's not super fast. It's not a process that's going to happen overnight, but this is partly what helps the Chinampas stay alive. So a healthy Chinampa will be kind of higher than the level of the water. You'll have to maybe take some steps or like climb a bit to get to it. And so this is the landscape today.
We wanted to share with you a little bit of how it feels to be there, because when we talk about Chinampas, we are not talking about a piece of land, but actually like a biocultural landscape. So you see the line of willow trees that are holding the Chinampas together. We see the crops to the left. I mean, if you imagine, I can almost hear the sound of the wind and the water when I'm watching this video. Very clearly to the left now we can see, and even to the right as well, the technique that Diego just told us about the chapin. We see the water lilies in the channel, which is actually an invasive species and is leading to a lot of eutrophication or excessive organic matter within the lake. It's a current problem. Actually, to the left, you can also see how the channel between the Chinampa in the bottom and in the top would need a little bit more of maintenance, but it's part of like the abandonment that this ecosystem has been, it's going on. Rowing in the channels is not easy. It's hard to go straight, and you need a lot of strength. We see beehives to the right. And in our very brief trip through the Chinampas, we can see that there's still some cultivation going on. This is in the reserve of Cuemanco. However, some of patches are still abandoned. To the right, in white, we see greenhouse tunnels. Yeah, which is something that has been implemented recently to improve the yields of the products. So when we talk about Chinampas, we've been talking about this really old agricultural practice, this landscape, but it also comes with a really rich gastronomic heritage. Here is the different types of quelites. I don't know if this is a familiar word for you, but these are greens that are only grown within rainy season. There are, I think, more than 100 documented different species of quelites. Each of them has its own flavor, and it's a big part of having a chinampa. Here we're cooking tamales with the quelites. So the idea is to understand this like intricate relationship between agriculture and food, and also the social relations that are maintained with the food system of like cooking together, sharing the food, just so that you see the final result. Here are some beans. Well, it's not beans, it's actually ayocotes, which is a different species of the plant, but they are cooked in dry chilies, and also it's pork with aquelite that it's, in English it's called purslane. And it's just to show how taking care of chinampas is also taking care of the food that comes with them, and the traditions, and the way family is weaved through food and through the moments. And it's not only daily moments, but also festivities.
So besides being a source of food and besides being like part of this history of Mexico, Chinampas are part of a very important ecosystem. So the canals, the lakes, the wetlands that surround the Chinampas are an aquatic ecosystem where many endemic species live. So for instance, axolotl, or I guess in English it's axolotl, which are these kind of salamander-like looking creatures with these like weird gills around their ears. Those things, those creatures, which are now nearly extinct in the wild, I think the last survey counted maybe 50 wild axolotl in the lake of Xochimilco and the other lakes around Mexico City. They were a species that inhabited the lake. It was actually so abundant that it was part of the food in Xochimilco. If you ask people, even like my age, in their 20s, 30s, they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we'd eat axolotl tamales, or we'd have like axolotl soup or things like that. Now, of course, it's very frowned upon. Now it's, when I tell you, ooh, do you want to eat some axolotl? Well, I don't know, when they first told me like, oh, I remember eating axolotl tamales, I was like, what? Axolotl tamales? What? Tell me more about that, because I like to know about that history. But that environment has been, there's like a lot of environmental issues with this ecosystem, partly because Mexico City extracts some of its water from Xochimilco, so the canals were getting dried up. The solution to that was to set up a treatment plant and pump treated water back into the canals. So it's this very weird solution, very roundabout, very complex. And it's like there's also lots of migratory water birds that come to the lake in certain seasons, especially in the winter, come from the north. So it's got like this very important ecological role. It has a very big ecological importance in the region, being one of the last lakes and one of these last watery landscapes that remain. What's interesting, though, is that it's still a human-made landscape. The Chinampas are still part of like this culture that still survives today. And of course, with new times and with the advent of modernity, there are new challenges to the Chinampas. So on the one hand, for instance, we've got urbanization. Urbanization not only ended the Chinampas in Mexico City throughout the colonial period. The urban sprawl, like the growth of the city, has also been taking over the Chinampas in Xochimilco. So nowadays you have like pavements and paved streets right next to canals, and in some cases, a lot of the streets in the center of Xochimilco used to be canals. So for instance, you can see this door, which is kind of really high up on these stairs, and that's because at some point this was water. So like you needed to have the door a bit higher up, and maybe you'd park your boat there, come out, board it, go off. You have the names of streets like this: Antiguo Canal de San Juan, the old Canal of St. John, which up to recently was, relatively recently, at least a few decades ago, it was still a canal, and now it's full of houses, street lights, cables. You've got the willow trees growing in the middle of the street. Willow trees that would have been at the edge of the Chinampa, would have been holding together the earth, are now part of the urban landscape, growing among houses, and in some cases you can like kind of see the line of trees of like where the edge of the water would have been, and was now part of the city. And so there's a very complex relationship in Xochimilco between the city and the lake. A lot of people who still live in the lake and who still practice agriculture in the Chinampas oppose urbanization. So for instance, this ad says, the neighbors of the community and the Council of Women for Rescuing Chinampas will not allow more urban growth. We will look after and protect our patrimony, our heritage. So there's different groups within Xochimilco trying to work against these things that are happening, trying to keep the canals alive, trying to keep the Chinampas alive. And so, for instance, sorry about all the ahs, it's just... so part of the problems with urbanization, besides paving over the canals, is pollution. So there's a lot of pollution in the canals, partly because some houses don't have proper drainage, so the drainage goes into the water, partly because people throw rubbish into the lake, partly because of agro-industrial products like different chemicals that end up going into the water. So what the water is full of nitrogen and other things that, for instance, make these lilies grow all over. So these two pictures are actually taken on the same canal. So when you're walking through the center of Xochimilco towards the canals in this particular route, you go onto this bridge, and then to your left you have this very beautiful, like idyllic Xochimilco landscape. Yeah, there are some houses on the left, but you can see the Chinampas, you can see the willows, the flowers, the boats. And then you look at the other side of the bridge, and you have lilies all over. You can't really navigate through there anymore because the lilies will stop the boat. It is very hard to row through lilies. You have lots of rubbish, and it's just like a couple of meters away, one from the other. So there's a lot of new challenges to Xochimilco. Alongside that, tourism has become a very big part of Xochimilco. That's not so recent, but it's still there. And with that, there's been like a wave of gentrification or potential gentrification of the Chinampas. So a lot of people started coming to Xochimilco during the pandemic, trying to find a spot of land to farm, trying to get like some fresh air in the city. Other projects have started that are from people from outside of Xochimilco that cater to tourists with a lot of money and that claim to be saving the Chinampas and doing a lot for the Chinampas, but local people are like, they don't really work with us, they don't really do anything with us, it's just their project and their own thing. It's more of a business than actually like a rescue thing. And alongside that, there are some political issues, which Lucia will tell you a bit about.
So just to give you a sense how the resistance of the Chinampas is ongoing, this is a picture from December 2022, when the government, without properly informing the people, went into where their potable water, their spring water that goes to the houses, is to make some changes to the system without informing anything else. So with the history that the spring waters from Xochimilco were piped into the richer areas of the city, people went into riot and were like, you're not taking more water from us. And the government sent very quickly riot police to them. And most of them were older women. So just to share with you that the resistance of Chinampas is still happening. A banner from the movement, and we just wanted to share a little bit of the work that our organization, which is Collaboratory Kitchen, is doing in this territory. So in the project, we really believe in the power of food and sharing the food. So this is an activity where we brought a lot of the excess. So Chinampas often have the problem that they are not able to sell their products in the market. So they have a lot of leftovers. So we collected leftovers from different producers and put them into what we call a mobile kitchen and invite people to connect and to cook. The mobile kitchen was through this like bicycle taxis, which are necessary in downtown Xochimilco because since many of the streets used to be water channels, they're very narrow. And this is sort of like the creations of food that came from that day. This is like aquelite, like the greens I was telling you about with the sauce. And it's also a way of like weaving the community. We also have a community radio called Radio Cocina Colaboratorio, where we promote having conversations with local people, with people from outside the community like us, with people from the community. Some of these interviews are now recorded and now in public platforms like Spotify or YouTube or SoundCloud. We also are doing a project called the Living Biocultural Archive, where we think it's important to document and, for example, save the local seeds, but we cannot save the local seeds just by like grabbing and containing the germplasm. It's important that seeds are planted, that food is eaten, and it's a way of keeping it alive. So we've done seed exchange with the communities. And whenever we do seed exchange, we just not keep the seed and then give it to someone else, but we like to think of the seed of not only like the germoplasm, as I was saying, but also like the stories around it. So we always grab the story, who kept the seed, how do they cook it. And for instance, we had this like activation where we had banners of the different seeds that we collected in this seed exchange that were in a museum for a couple of days. And then on one day, these seeds were taken down and were dispersed among downtown Xochimilco. These banners, these like flags were placed in different, this bici taxis is the term, but it's like taxis and bicycles, sort of in a way of like dispersing the seeds, occupying the spaces that have been taken away. For example, this it was not only the banner, but like a little like a fanzine with an explanation of what was going on, why there's this flag. And also a small speaker that was telling the stories that we recorded at the moment of the seed exchange. There have been also workshops showing women how to row, because it's often the case that they do not know, it's mostly men, and this is something basic because they need to know how to navigate their territory. Especially, and we have also done several workshops of sharing agro-ecological methods with people. Usually, the way this is done is not like an expert is going to share how things should be done. It's more of a dialogue between people that are actually working on the land, on what are the techniques that have worked better for them. This is the name Colectivo Aguajote of one of our partners. They give great workshop. They have weaved a really nice connection of different people that are working in the Chinampas. And another of our very important partners is Humedalia. Here I'm also sharing a picture of a community kitchen that is being built in Xochimilco. The idea is that it can be like sort of like the metaphor that we like in our project, that the kitchen is a way to start building the community where people can go and cook together or have lunch together. And it's been designed with the people from the community that we're working, and it has several eco-technologies. Since we are part of this like larger collective, I'm gonna show you pictures with all the members. Our group is not only in Xochimilco, it also works in other two communities, in Oaxaca and in Chiapas. And I wanted also to share pictures of them because they help us develop the different materials, they help inspire us and have all these conversations. This is it. Here it's our contact, and I think we have a little bit of time. We're going to be here in the museum for a while if anyone wants to approach us, but feel free to send us an email or more modern Instagram way.
Yeah, some of the, you can also like look up at the webpage, you'll find some of the recipes, some of these activations and things we've done, or you can follow us on Instagram where we also like have some of these things. Like Lucia said, write us an email, come talk to us while we're still here in the evening if you have any questions or want to know more about it.
We have about 2 minutes, so if someone has one quick question, we can take it. Otherwise, we will close out the program. Any quick questions? All right. So thank you very much, Lucia and Diego. Oh, one.
Right here.
Microphone?
Microphone, sir.
Or just shout it out.
No, don't do that. We won't hear it.
Okay, so just for the people watching it online, in case there's anyone, the question is, do the axolotl have a mechanism by which they turn into like fully developed amphibians if the water level goes down? I'm gonna defer to our more biologist specialist.
So they don't have. That would be great. But unfortunately, evolution and adaptation has not provided that for us. Axolotls are very interesting because it's an amphibian that remains in a larger state. It doesn't turn into like more. It doesn't do the like metamorphosis. And one of the reasons why amphibians worldwide, and particularly axolotls in such a polluted waters as Xochimilco, are endangered is because they breathe through their skin. So, yeah, that would be a great idea if they could change. But yeah.
So let's give them a warm welcome and a round of applause. Thank you very much. So,